I can't believe I've got to teach someone today that looks like that. And why is one of my students sitting in my living room? We'll talk about those things today and other things. Episode 22, Substitute Teachers Lounge. All right, welcome episode 22, Substitute Teachers Lounge. I hope you had a good week. I did all middle school this week, so after doing several weeks where I had multiple high school days back to middle school, and I taught three different subjects, science. I also taught a little bit of English, and I was the band director for one day this week, so I enjoyed every day. It's always great to reacquaint ourselves with the kids. Let me mention to you, you've heard me talk about Chartable. That's Chartable. If you have a podcast of your own, I have found that's a good way to track your progress. You heard me talk a few weeks back about how we had moved to number 30. Let me tell you the boomerang effect that Chartable shows. As you can probably guess, when new episodes are released every Sunday, then the stats start going up at that point, and then there's kind of a boomerang effect as the newness wears off. It goes down a little bit. So I typically vary anywhere from the low 30s up into the hundreds even as the week progresses. Then it boomerangs back after a new episode is listed. So that's the way you'll normally see daily progress. I get an email that shows the daily progress. But the reason I'm bringing it all up is for the first time we got as high as number 25 this week. That is 25 in the United States in terms of number of downloads that Apple is showing, number of listens. I'm not sure exactly how they calculate that, but we're number 25 in the country. I'm thankful for that. And we're also charting in several different countries now. I see Canada, Brazil, Spain, Australia, Germany, Indonesia, and the United Kingdom all charting. So that's really exciting for me. And I give you guys all the credit. I appreciate all your help. I know from posting this week on the Facebook page and getting so many emails back, I'm going to apologize to you guys right in advance. I'm trying my best to answer all the emails and get all those interviews set up. As you know, my volleyball schedule is taking off again as the middle school season starts, so a lot of my evenings are tied up. I apologize that I'm not as accessible as I would like to be, but I guarantee you've heard me say this before, I would much rather be interviewing somebody than me just on here yakking. So I will get back to you and we'll set things up. I've literally heard from people from all over the country, as far away as Hawaii. I emailed back and forth with somebody from Hawaii. We've got people from the Colorado area. I can't wait to get those interviews started because I want to see how schools differ in different regions. I know one of the ladies that I have traded emails with mentioned that she has taught in small towns as well as large cities. So I'm interested to see if she thinks there's any kind of factor there. So we'll get that started soon, but I just wanted to let you know how excited I was that we're number 25 in the country. I also want to mention, again, my email address is gregcollinssubstitute@gmail.com. Twitter is @SubTeachLounge, and you can also find our Facebook page. It's called Substitute Teachers Lounge, and I want to share with you what I'm going to be doing on the Facebook page because I want to kind of spur some interest in that direction. We're already into triple digits, so I appreciate you all for following that. Most of you are just reading and not commenting a lot. I would love to hear your comments. To be honest, that's really why I set it up. I'm going to try to do some things to spur some interest in that direction. Here's what I plan to do. Pretty much every week when I go out, I have a trivia question in my back pocket. All these kids know that I love music, that I was the top 40 geek back when I was their age, all the way till now. Who am I kidding? I've always followed music. I've always liked Casey Kasem. I still re-listen to his shows on Saturday morning on Sirius XM. They re-air his shows. I love those old top 40 shows. I tell the kids that I listen to their music. I mean, Uptown Funk, for instance, from about 4 years ago, is probably one of my favorite songs all time. They know that my favorite song all time is the Three Dog Night version of Joy to the World, the one that starts out, Jeremiah was a bullfrog. So they always enjoy when I come in and give them a music question. So I'm going to tell you guys what the question is. I'm not going to give you the answer until next week, unless you would like to go over to the Facebook page, Substitute Teachers Lounge. Today, the day this is released, I'm going to post the question there. I want you to give it your best try for answers, and then maybe about Wednesday, I will tell you what the answer is. But here's the question, and again, it's on Substitute Teachers Lounge is the name of the page on Facebook. Here's the question that I asked them this week. 3 weeks ago, a song re-entered the top 40 that had been in there before. The first time it had been popular was 1983. 1983, and it was back in the top 40. I asked them what that song was, and I told them that they have all heard it. I'm guessing all of you guys have heard it. And to be honest, I had one student probably answer within 5 seconds. And I asked it of probably maybe 4 or 5 different classes. I started asking it last week. But give your best shot at that question. Most of the students did not get it until after I gave them some really good hints. Then they got it right away. So let's have some fun with it. Go over to the Substitute Teachers Lounge Facebook page. Put your guess down. I'll have the question in there in just a few hours. And just to clarify for those that are listening to this podcast a little bit, several days or years for that matter, months after when it was first released. This is November 17th, 2019. So the answer will be revealed next week, which is the Sunday before Thanksgiving, which is very late this year. We don't have as much time to shop. Maybe that's a good thing. So get over there, check that out, and I'll try to do something to that effect every week. The kids are starting to share jokes with me. It's really kind of hilarious. So I'll share some of those with you as well, because I'm excited that they feel able to come up and do that. I had to teach another uncomfortable subject this week. Let's not go into detail. Let's just mention that it was the digestive system, and it's something that all those kids need to learn. But it sure was hard to keep them serious because of some of the things we had to talk about. But to be honest, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and they were taking their notes, they were doing their projects, and they got all their work done regardless of that. That's how my week went. That's what we'll start doing. I also want to mention to you that if you go to the website to listen to this that's on Buzzsprout, I have changed that. It used to be just buzzsprout.com/a 6-digit number, and I didn't like that very well. And I really like Buzzsprout. This is not a commercial for them, but if you're looking to get into podcasting, I would recommend that. There are some free options. Buzzsprout is not free, but I think their service is worth it. It's not that much per month. There's different types of plans. So what they have done this week is allow me to create my own name for my website. So my website is now called substituteteacherslounge.buzzsprout.com. So that's substituteteacherslounge.buzzsprout. And I really like their service. I listen to all their podcasts. They have several that they do every week. It has given me an enormous number of ideas in that regard. And I mentioned that because I'm going to get better with my show notes. Starting maybe not this afternoon, but sometime this week, I'm going to update the show notes for this episode and continue to do that for every episode that occurs from now on. Basically, it's what most people refer to as show notes. I will include links to anything I mention. In fact, today I'm going to mention some links, and I'll get those in there. One link, you may be sick of me talking about it, but until I think that you know how great a product it is, and no, that's not a commercial either. You can get it for free, as a matter of fact. But we'll start doing show notes. There is a feature on Buzzsprout that will allow me to transcribe this podcast every week. There is a cost to that, obviously, because they have more work involved on their end to do that. So I'm considering that. Before I do that, I might do some other kind of cost thing. Somebody, by the way, one of my listeners mentioned to me if I ever considered, as far as paying expenses, to go to Patreon. Patreon is a site that is set up. You have to join a membership and you have to pay so much money. And then what I would be liable to do at that point is to provide bonus content, or in other words, content that you'd only receive if you went there. Now, if I ever did that, and I'm not sure I ever will, but if I ever did that, I would definitely make sure that it doesn't affect the podcast, that I don't pull stuff off the podcast just to save it for that. So, but, that's what one of the listeners mentioned, so I'll see how that goes. But I just wanted you to know that we'll set up those show notes so that you can then go to the website and look back for anything that we may have talked about that you want to remind yourself of. Let me re-mention Jobulator and SubAlert, and let me tell you why. Right after I told you that SubAlert was first 90% of the time, the next 4 notices that I got, Jobulator was first. But I am still going to stick with SubAlert. They are still first most of the time. It's your decision. I really have found another feature on SubAlert that their calendar feature is outstanding. You just basically hit a button. It merges it with your calendar. I can just go to my regular calendar on my iPhone, and it pulls up all the information so easily. It's concise. If the teacher has left notes, it just tells you that there's notes, and then when you hit that particular time on your calendar, it will show you the notes. So I'm going to stick with SubAlert. I think that is going to provide the best for me. And then finally, before we get to the main topic, I mentioned to you in the opening, why was one of my students sitting in my living room? I hope it kind of made you let your mind wander. I mean, had I gotten in trouble with somebody and it was so bad that their parents and this girl was in our living room? What's going on? Well, it just so happened that our neighborhood has a monthly meeting, and they were meeting at my house. And that particular night, I came in, not late, but late after when their meeting started. I came in from volleyball, and my wife said, there is a young lady in the living room that knows you and wanted to talk to you. And I'm thinking, well, is that my granddaughter? Is she at this meeting for some reason? Well, it turns out that one of the students I had in class was actually there with her mother in the meeting. It's a ladies type meeting that my wife was hosting, and she was sitting on the couch. So it was kind of fun to see her in that environment. And she smiled and I smiled, and she knew I would see her in class again in the future. So that's why there was one of my students in the living room. I didn't get to stay long because, I got marching orders that when there's this all ladies meeting. So I suffered through going upstairs and watching basketball that night. So it ended up being a good evening. And I love it that those kids like to talk to me even outside of the classroom situation. Started middle school volleyball this week. They did the same there. Several of them came up to talk to me from both sides of the net just to say hello. And the person taking the tickets was kind of joking with me. He said, I don't know if I've ever seen an official come up here or come in here that the players have gone over to shake their hand. So believe me, I enjoy all that. You'll hear me talk about extracurricular activities all the time. That just adds to the connectivity and the closeness you can get to those students. So let me ask you this. I hope that you don't fall into this situation. I know that you don't. I think those of you that are listening to this podcast, you're doing so because you want ideas on how to deal with these kids and how to make sure that they learn and how to get close to them. I don't think if you don't want that, I'm guessing that I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'm guessing those people that don't want that are not listening to this podcast because maybe they don't want any little extra incentive. So I appreciate all of you guys that are listening to this. I know, I hate to admit it, but I've heard some people in the past talk about how certain students look, not their background, but just how they behave, those types of things in the hallways, in the classrooms. And what I'm nervous about, or concerned about, I shouldn't say nervous, I'm concerned that maybe we sometimes fall into a situation where certain things cause us to look at different students different ways, and we shouldn't do that. I remember in the past having a couple of students that they were a little bit disruptive, and then I was shocked at that they were straight A students. Isn't it funny that we sometimes let some things we see, affect the way we teach others, and we really shouldn't do that. All the students are there for a reason, and they need us as to be someone that they look up to. I just wrote down a few things that sometimes may affect us if we're not careful. One of the things that I'll mention when I showed my students this week in one classroom, I had a copy of a picture of mine of my old college days. Remember, that was in the late 70s. All the guys were still wearing their hair long. I had hair probably not down to my shoulders, but the kind that covered my ears and went down a lot longer. The kind that I look back at now that looked a little goofy to me. It still looks good on some people, in my opinion. Maybe I should have just grew it out and combed it in front of my face. That's working for some singers now. Maybe that would have helped me to hide my appearance a little bit. But let me just mention some of these things. Students try to draw attention to themselves by doing various different things, like the way they fix their hair. That's the one I was just talking about. Does it bother you to see certain types of jewelry like nose rings? Does it bother you to see some of the guys wearing, the pants, the style where it looks like they're halfway down? Does it bother you to see certain students that walk down the hallway in an arrogant sense? Do you get affected when some students have been disruptive in your class before? Do you always let that affect you in the future, assuming they're going to be disruptive again? Are you affected when somebody just doesn't maybe talk as well as others? Some people have more of a gift for speech and that type of thing. Do you let some ethnicities bother you? I hope we're past that. Do you let tattoos bother you? Do you let dangling earrings, especially for a boy, do you let that bother you? I just mentioned one of the students a few seconds ago. Do you treat a disruptive student who makes straight A's differently than you treat someone that's disruptive but is more of an average C type person? Do you treat people who you may tell you that they are part of an alternative lifestyle? Do you let things affect you? Maybe there's some students whose hygiene is not as good as others. That's a lot of things. There's also ways, especially at the high school level, when I was in high school, girls really didn't have leggings, but you see a lot of those around. And, does that the way you teach? Do you teach, does it affect you when you see jeans with holes in them? That's one big long list to say all of this. All the students we teach, they all need to be taught. And I try my best not to let any of that affect me. In fact, I even will go the other side of that. When I see someone that has just changed their hair, whether it's color or haircuts or hairstyles, now I'm not going to fake it. If I think it looks goofy, I probably won't say anything to them. I'll just say new hairstyle, looks good. But if I think it looks good, I always try to find something good because students at that age, when they do something to change their appearance, sometimes they're a little bit self-conscious about it until they see others. So I try to go out of my way to make sure I tell them that I like what they've done. I want to continue them to be motivated when they're around me. If they saw me and not say anything but instead roll my eyes, they're going to remember that the next time they see me. So I want today's episode to be encouraging from the standpoint of, regardless of the situation that we see these students in, the way they affect us, everybody should be taught equally. just because they don't do things exactly the way we do, they should all be taught equally. Just because they don't dress like I do, just because they don't dress like my kids did, just because they look a little bit different. I mentioned to one of them that I had met one of their siblings in another school. That person's face kind of got serious, and they said, "Oh, did he treat you with respect?" And I said, "Well, yeah, he was fine with me. His appearance was different. His hair was a little bit longer than some of them are wearing now. He did have earrings. And to be honest, when I see people that dress differently than me, I actually try to walk around and give them attention just like I do all the others. I certainly don't want to teach them differently just because they look different than other students. I would encourage all of us to have that as one of your goals. Everybody's different. Let me give you a continuation of a story that I began with you last year. One of the students that was a little disruptive in class, nothing I couldn't handle, nothing bad, nothing offensive, nothing that involved a foul language or anything along that regard. But, tended to like attention, but I could tell he was smart. That was, part of the class I had for a long time last year. I had him back in class in the last few weeks. By the way, I know that a lot of the students that I'm teaching is listening to that, and they think it's kind of funny because they know that some of the stories I tell about them, even though I keep it private and don't mention names, they know, they remember the story, and so they're listening. But I just wanted to really give credit. I always gave this student the benefit of the doubt, and this year I've had him one time, and not only was he well behaved, he actually got up and walked around and helped the other students with their work for that day. When I saw a student struggle and I knew that this other student knew how to do it, I sent him over there. It's the same student that was distracting him in my class that I've talked about last year. If I had treated him differently when he was distracting, maybe he wouldn't have been as open as that. So I say all that to say this. I don't care how distracting someone has been. I don't care what their appearance looks like. Whatever it is, we still need to teach those children. We don't want to have favorites. Students ask me all the time, am I your favorite? And I still, I've told you this before. I joke around with them. Yes, you're my favorite, but you're tied with everybody else. And that's the way I try to approach it. Deep down, I even try, just small tasks like taking attendance to the office. I try to spread that around, especially to students that I feel like, maybe they're not given a lot of credit very often for what they're doing. So I'm going to give them a chance to show me that they can do something responsible and do that for me. Forget about those categories that I threw out earlier. Even such things as there's a reading method that some of us use where you ask a student to read the first paragraph. Usually I choose a hand, and then they ask another student themselves to read another paragraph. Now, I don't want to traumatize any of the kids, but I am teaching, 6th to 12th grade. So a lot of times I think some of the students just need a little motivation. Some like to read more than others, but I have found this to be a real good method for having, things read in class. Sometimes I will read to them to get it started, but I don't want to look down on kids for that reason. If they don't want to read, I'm not going to force them to read, but if I can tell they just need a little bit of encouragement, I will try to do that, and then I'll work on it, and then maybe I will talk to them privately, maybe try to motivate them to read tomorrow, so something along those lines. I told you on a very early episode that I've run into situations, in fact, it might have been the first episode, where I could tell a couple of the teachers fussed at one particular student, even though there were other students doing the same way at the hallway. And then I came to realize after a while that student had been disruptive. I hope that I don't even do that, because just because they've been disruptive once, I don't want to look for them and then call them out for specific reasons in the future. If they're disruptive and I need to call them out, I will. But if there's like 10 kids in the hallway doing the same thing that they shouldn't be, I'm not going to call out one student over the other just because they've done it more often. Let's really try to give all these students the benefit of the doubt. I honestly think that if I hadn't shown some of the students that might draw a little bit more attention from the average person, if I hadn't given them a chance to speak to me and show them that I believed in them, that they probably wouldn't respond to me in the way that they have. And I'm really thankful that I've tried to keep things equal. You know, we don't want to be judgmental. You know, my church, we played Kahoot at my church. I think I told you that. And we had some judgmental questions on there. I asked them if they judge people outside of the church. I asked them if they judge people inside of the church. And some of them, as you might expect, answered yes to both. In fact, me and my preacher are going to begin a podcast soon to talk about things like this. But unfortunately, our mindsets a lot of times are driven to being judgmental. I used to do it. I hope I don't do it anymore. I'm not perfect by any means. I'm guessing that I do it on occasion without thinking about it, and that's what I'm really trying to correct. So it doesn't matter at school if they have wild hair, if they have nose rings, if they are arrogant, any of the stuff I mentioned, tattoos. I think that's fine. I know what I did when I was in school to try to get attention. And, you know, maybe that's not even trying to get attention. It's just who they are. So let's all remember that regardless of how one student looks versus the other, let's teach them all equally. Let's motivate them, and let's give them a reason to trust us and be confident in teaching them. So I want to know your thoughts about this. As always, you can go to the Substitute Teachers Lounge Facebook page to help with that. One final thought I almost forgot to mention. I have gotten an advanced certification in Kahoot. You know that I like to use Kahoot a lot. They've got so many good tools, including the reports that will show teachers how, you know, based on how some students answered questions, how they should, you know, progress from there. So you're going to hear me talk about Kahoot constantly because I really like it. So if you're ever looking for some kind of tool to test your students and then maybe retest them if you identify a question that didn't work as well, you know what you need to teach them, and then retest them to see if it worked. And Kahoot's advanced training part of their system really helps you to do that. I take tests too to try to get through that advanced training, so I'm excited that we've done that. I'm hoping that maybe I can find a phrase every week now in the classroom that I really like. This was actually in a teacher's lounge. It's not something posted where the children could see, but I liked it when I saw it because it was basically referring to the way teachers could address students, and it said, "You seem so down on yourself. I want others to see you the way I do." So I really like that philosophy. We can motivate these students. I can see their expressions. I know when something's bothered them, especially if it's students that I've had several times. A lot of them, you know, they sometimes have something that's bothering them, and I think that's a great phrase. You seem so down on yourself. I want others to see you the way I do. So what can I do for you in that regard? So I really like that one. I hope that you've enjoyed this week's episode. I want to get you more involved. I'll have that trivia question posted later today. Let you give your answers. So let's stop with the joke that one of my students told me this week. Why can't you hear a pterodactyl in the bathroom? Because the P is silent. Sorry about that. You can share that or not share that as you want to. And happy birthday, Anna. My granddaughter is 6 years old today. I'll see you guys next week. Substitute Teachers Lounge. Music provided by Ben Sound.